I've never been able to forget what I saw that night. I was 9, maybe 10 years old, living with my dad in this massive old terrace house he'd bought a few years earlier. The place was built sometime in the 1800s, 5 floors of creaking wood, narrow staircases, and rooms that always felt like they were holding their breath. My dad loved it. He said it had character. I just thought it was creepy. The house had always been strange. Not horror movie strange, but enough to make you second-guess yourself. You'd hear footsteps on the floor above when you knew for a fact no one was up there. Voices that sounded like conversation, drifting from empty rooms. My dad would brush it off, say old houses settle, that the pipes made noise, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't imagining anything. And after what happened that night, I knew he had to feel it too, even if he wouldn't admit it. My sister was staying with my mum that week, so it was just the 2 of us in the house. I remember that detail clearly because the silence felt heavier without her around. Normally, even when she was asleep, there was this sense that someone else was there. That night, the house felt hollow. Empty in a way that made my skin crawl, though I didn't know why yet. I'd gone to bed like usual. My room was on the 3rd floor, tucked at the end of a long hallway that always seemed darker than it should have been, even with the lights on. I always closed my door before I went to sleep. Always. It wasn't a rule or anything, just something I did. I didn't like the idea of that long hallway staring into my room all night, so I'd shut the door, climb into bed, and eventually fall asleep. That night something woke me up. I don't know what it was at first. Not a sound, exactly. More like a feeling. You know that sensation when you suddenly become aware that you're not alone? That prickle on the back of your neck, the weight of being watched. That's what pulled me out of sleep. My eyes opened slowly, and for a second I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what was wrong. Then I noticed the door. It was wide open. I felt my stomach drop. I remembered closing it. I knew I had. But there it was, swung all the way open, the dark hallway beyond it like a gaping mouth. My heart started to pound, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe my dad had checked on me. Maybe he'd opened it and forgot to close it. That had to be it. But then I saw it. At the foot of my bed, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It was huge, easily 7 feet tall, maybe taller. So it wasn't solid, not like a person. It was more like a shadow, but darker than any shadow should be. Thick, dense, like it was sucking the light out of the room. I couldn't make out any features, no face, no clothes, nothing. Just this towering human-shaped void standing there, completely motionless, watching me. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to sit up, to do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I just lay there, frozen, staring at this thing at the end of my bed. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was my dad. Maybe it was a coat rack I'd forgotten about. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark, but deep down I knew. I knew it wasn't any of those things. And then it noticed me. I don't know how I knew, but I felt it. The moment my eyes focused on it, something changed. It was like the air in the room shifted. The figure didn't move at first, but I could feel it acknowledging me, realizing I was awake, that I was looking right at it. That's when it started to melt. I don't have a better word for it. The shadow didn't walk away or fade, it sank. It collapsed in on itself, pouring down into the floor like thick black liquid, dissolving into the carpet. I watched it happen, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. In seconds it was gone. Completely gone, and then the door slammed shut. The sound was deafening in the silence. A violent, deliberate slam that shook the walls. I gasped, finally able to move, and scrambled backward in my bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I was shaking. My whole body was trembling, and I couldn't stop it. I stared at the door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for that thing to come back. But nothing happened. I don't know how long I stayed awake after that. Hours, maybe. I didn't move from that spot, didn't close my eyes, didn't even blink. I just watched the door, listened to the silence, and prayed that morning would come soon. I lived in that house from the time I was 5 until I was 17. 12 years. And for every single one of those years, I knew we weren't alone in there. It wasn't something we talked about much, at least not at first. You just kind of adapted, learned to live with it, because what else were you going to do? The activity was constant, but most of it was pretty standard stuff. Footsteps when no one was walking. Voices in empty rooms, not clear enough to make out words, but distinct enough that you knew it wasn't the TV or someone outside. Lights would flip on and off by themselves. Doors would open or slam shut with no explanation. We'd put fresh batteries in the remote or a flashlight, and they'd be dead within hours. It was like the house was draining them on purpose. My mom used to get frustrated about the batteries. She'd buy them in bulk, and they'd all be worthless within a week. Eventually, she just started keeping a drawer full of them and stopped questioning it. That's how we dealt with most of it, really. We just stopped questioning it. The thing is, none of it ever felt malicious. Annoying, sure, unsettling, absolutely. But it never felt like whatever was in that house wanted to hurt us. It was more like they were just there, existing alongside us, making their presence known. So we coexisted. We'd hear footsteps upstairs and just call out, "We hear you," and keep doing whatever we were doing. It became normal. My father was a skeptic for the longest time. He'd blame everything on the house settling, or the wind, or us being careless. But even he came around eventually. I remember the night he finally admitted it. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and a cabinet door swung open on its own, then slammed shut hard enough to rattle the dishes inside. He just sat there staring at it and said, "All right." I believe you. That was it. No big discussion. He just accepted it and moved on. The activity always got worse when we were renovating, which was pretty much constantly. My parents were always trying to fix the place up. New paint, new floors, updating rooms. And every time we started a project, things would escalate. They'd start throwing stuff, small things mostly. A book would fly off a shelf. A picture frame would fall off the wall, even though the nail was still in place. Once, a screwdriver my dad had set down on a workbench launched itself across the room and clattered against the wall. He didn't even react. Just picked it up, muttered something under his breath, and kept working. We figured they didn't like us changing things. Maybe they were territorial. Maybe they just didn't like the noise and disruption. Either way, we learned to expect it. Renovations meant more activity. That was just how it was. But there was one incident that stood out above everything else. One thing that even now I can't think about without feeling that same knot of panic in my chest. It happened the day we moved in. I was 5 years old. The house was a mess back then. Most of the rooms were unfinished, half-painted, full of boxes and tools and dust. But there was one room in the basement that was done. It was small, carpeted, with walls that had been freshly painted white. My parents told me and my friend, her parents were helping us move, that we could play down there while the adults handled the heavy lifting. It seemed like the safest place for us. Out of the way, contained, so we went downstairs. I don't remember what we were playing. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I had this TV stand positioned right in front of my bedroom window. It wasn't ideal placement, but my room was small and there wasn't really anywhere else to put it. The thing is, there was a street light directly outside that window. It stayed on all night, every night, casting this pale orange glow through the blinds. I'd gotten used to it over the years. In the dark, I could always make out the basic shapes in my room. The dresser, the closet door, the outline of my TV on the stand. That's how I first noticed her. It started casually, like most things do. I'd be lying in bed trying to fall asleep, and I'd glance over toward the window, and there she'd be, just standing there, right next to the TV stand. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, you know? Shadows can look like anything when you stare at them long enough. Your brain fills in the gaps, So I'd blink, rub my eyes, look away and look back. But she was always there, same spot, same position. The more I looked, the clearer she became. She wasn't just a vague shadow. I could see her outline perfectly. She looked small, maybe my age, maybe younger. I could make out her hair, the way it hung down past her shoulders. I could see the shape of her head, her arms at her sides. She was just standing there, completely still, like she was watching me. Or maybe watching the room. I couldn't tell. I didn't tell anyone at first. What was I going to say? That there was a shadow in my room? My parents would have told me I was imagining things, that I needed to go to sleep and stop scaring myself. So I kept it to myself. But every single night there she was. Always in the same spot. Always perfectly still. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep anymore. I'd lie there in the dark, staring at her, waiting for her to move or disappear or do something. But she never did. She just stood there. Hours would pass. I'd watch the clock on my nightstand go from 10 p.m. to midnight to 2 in the morning, and she'd still be there. My eyes would ache from keeping them open, but I couldn't look away. I was terrified that if I closed them, something would happen, that she'd move closer, that she'd do something. Some nights I'd try to convince myself it was nothing, just the way the light hit the TV stand, just shadows and shapes that my tired brain was turning into something else. But deep down I knew. I could feel it. There was something wrong about her, something that made my stomach twist every time I looked. One night I'd had enough. I don't know what made me snap. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the frustration of being too scared to sleep in my own room. But I sat up in bed, grabbed the pillow from beside me and threw it as hard as I could. It sailed across the room and hit the TV stand with a soft thud, then dropped to the floor. The second I threw it, I regretted it. I don't know what I expected. For her to disappear, for the shadow to vanish and prove it was nothing. Instead, I just felt this wave of panic, like I'd done something I shouldn't have. Like I'd provoked something that I should have left alone. I immediately yanked the other pillow over my head and pressed it down hard over my face. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut and stayed like that, frozen, barely breathing. I counted in my head, 1, 2, 3, I made it to 60. Then another 60, a couple minutes at least. Long enough that I thought maybe it was safe to look. I slowly lifted the pillow and peeked out. She was right there, right next to my bed. At the edge, inches away from me. I could see her so clearly now, clearer than I ever had before. The shape of her face, the way her hair fell. She was just standing there, completely still. And she was so close I could have reached out and touched her. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding to scream. It just tore out of me, loud and raw and panicked. I scrambled backward in my bed, pressing myself against the headboard, and kept screaming. Within seconds, my bedroom door flew open. My parents rushed in, my dad flipping the light switch. The room flooded with light. She was gone. My parents stood there in the doorway, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. My mom came over and sat on the edge of my bed, asking what was wrong, if I'd had a nightmare. My dad checked the closet, looked under the bed, did the whole parent routine. I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled and breathless. A girl. There was a girl. Right there. Right next to me. They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. My mom said I'd had a bad dream, that I was overtired. My dad said the streetlight probably made the shadows look weird, and my imagination ran wild. They tucked me back in, told me everything was fine, and left the light on for me. Eventually they went back to their room. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat there with the light on, staring at the spot where she'd been. A few days passed. I didn't see her again, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept expecting her to show up, to be standing there when I turned around. I avoided looking at the TV stand at night. I made sure my light stayed on. I didn't tell anyone else what happened. Then my little sister said something. We were eating breakfast one morning, and out of nowhere she looked at my mom and said, "There's a little girl in my room." I froze. My spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. My mom laughed it off, said something about imaginary friends. But my sister shook her head. She wasn't smiling. She said, "No, I keep seeing her at night. She just stands there and looks at me." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't told my sister anything, not a word. She was younger than me, and I didn't want to scare her. But she was describing the exact same thing. A little girl standing in her room, just watching. My mom glanced at me, probably remembering my freak-out a few nights earlier. I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but didn't say anything. I looked at my sister. "What does she look like?" She shrugged. "I don't know. It's dark. But I can see her hair. It's long." The room went quiet. I never saw the girl again after that night, I screamed. But my sister kept seeing her for weeks. She'd mention it casually, like it was just part of her routine now. Eventually, she stopped bringing it up. I don't know if the girl left or if my sister just got used to her, but I think about it sometimes. About how clear she was that night. About how she moved from the TV. Growing up, I lived in an old house. And I mean old. The kind with creaky floorboards, drafty hallways, and rooms that always felt a little too cold even in summer. It was the type of place that naturally felt eerie, especially at night. As a kid, I saw shadows all the time. Heard weird noises. Doors would creak open on their own, swing shut without anyone touching them. The alarm would go off randomly in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. My parents always said it was the draft, or air pressure changes, or something technical like that. I accepted those explanations because, honestly, what else was I going to do? It was an old house. Old houses do weird things. That's what I told myself. My sister, who had her bedroom on the 3rd floor, used to sleepwalk a lot. She'd come down to my room in the middle of the night and just stand there staring at me. Sometimes she'd climb into my bed and fall asleep without saying a word. The next morning she'd have zero memory of it. I got used to waking up and finding her there. It was unsettling, sure, but it became normal after a while. Just another quirk of living in that house. Nothing that happened felt overtly supernatural. It was all explainable if you tried hard enough. Shadows could be tricks of the light. Noises could be the house settling. Doors could move because of the draft. Sleepwalking was a real thing. The alarm malfunctioning wasn't that strange. I convinced myself it was all in my head, that the creepiness of the house was just making me imagine things. But there was one night that I still can't explain. One night that no matter how hard I try, I can't rationalize away. I was 12 years old. My parents had gone to China for business, some extended trip that was going to last a few weeks. Since they'd be gone for so long, my siblings and I stayed with other family members or friends. It was easier that way. But I still had to go to hockey practice, and one evening I realized I'd forgotten some of my gear at home. My friend offered to come with me to grab it. We figured it'd be quick. Run in, get the stuff, run out. No big deal. The house was completely dark when we got there. I don't know why, but it felt darker than usual. Maybe because I knew no one was home. Maybe because it was late, and the streetlights didn't reach our driveway. Either way, the silence hit me the second I opened the front door. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. Like the house was holding its breath. We went straight to my room. I grabbed my gear, stuffed it into my bag, and was ready to leave. Easy. Done. But as we stepped out of my room and into the hallway, we both froze. Footsteps above us. In the attic, they were slow, deliberate. Someone walking around up there. My first thought was that one of my siblings must have come home. 2 of them had their bedrooms in the attic, so it made sense. Maybe they'd stopped by to grab something, same as me. "Hey," I shouted up toward the ceiling. "Are you home?" The footsteps stopped immediately. I waited, expecting to hear a door open or a voice call back. But there was nothing. Just silence again. I glanced at my friend. He looked uneasy, but I shrugged it off. Then the footsteps started again. But this time they were moving. Toward the stairs. I could hear them clearly now, slow, measured steps crossing the attic floor. And then they hit the stairs. The old wooden stairs that led down from the attic creaked loudly with every step. One step at a time. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. Creak. My stomach dropped. I stared at the staircase, waiting for someone to appear. Waiting to see which sibling it was, so I could yell at them for scaring us. But no one came. The footsteps kept descending, kept getting closer, but I couldn't see anyone. And then I felt it. It's hard to describe, but I swear I felt a weight in front of me, like someone had just stepped off the last stair and was standing right there, inches away. The air felt different, heavier, like something was taking up space that should have been empty. But there was nothing there. I couldn't move. My friend and I just stood there, staring at the empty space where the footsteps had stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to say something, to call out again, but the words wouldn't come. My friend grabbed my arm. "We need to go." His voice snapped me out of it. I nodded and we bolted. We didn't walk, we ran. Straight through the hallway, out the front door and into the driveway. I didn't stop until we were outside, standing under the streetlight, gasping for air. That's when I noticed my friend's face. He was pale, not just spooked, genuinely terrified. His hands were shaking, and he was staring back at the house like he'd seen something horrible. "What?" I asked, still trying to catch my breath. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the house, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Dude, what?" I pressed. He finally looked at me. "I saw something." "What do you mean you saw something?" "In the hallway. When we were leaving, I saw, I don't know, a face or a shape. It wasn't normal. I felt my blood run cold." "What are you talking about?" He shook his head, struggling to find the words. "It was standing there, in the doorway to the attic stairs. It looked, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't human. It was pale and the face was all wrong, like stretched or alien. I don't know. But it was staring at us. I hadn't seen anything. I'd been too focused on running, on getting out of there. But the way he was looking at me, the way his voice shook, he wasn't making it up. He'd seen something. Something that scared him so badly, he could barely talk about it. He never came to my house again, not once. Every time I invited him over after that, he'd make an excuse. Eventually, he just told me outright. He wasn't setting foot in that place ever again. I wish I could say I never thought about it after that night. But I do. My father-in-law passed away 3 months before my son was born. It was sudden, a heart attack that no one saw coming. One day he was here making plans to meet his first grandchild, and the next he was gone. My husband took it hard. I think part of him always held on to this hope, that somehow his dad would get to meet our boy, even though we knew that wasn't possible. When our son finally arrived, healthy and perfect, there was this bittersweet feeling hanging over everything, joy mixed with grief. My husband would hold our baby, and I'd catch him tearing up, and I knew he was thinking about his father, about how much he would have loved this, how he would have been the kind of grandfather who spoiled him rotten. We never really talked about it much. What was there to say? Life moves forward whether you're ready or not. When our son was about 2 years old, we moved into a new house. It was bigger than our apartment, with an actual yard and enough space for him to grow up in. The move was chaotic. Boxes everywhere, furniture that didn't quite fit, pictures still waiting to be hung. We were exhausted, but it felt good. Like a fresh start. Our son adjusted pretty quickly. Kids are resilient like that. He loved his new room, loved running around the hallway, loved exploring every corner of the house. And he seemed happy, really happy. He'd play by himself for hours, laughing and babbling away like he was having the time of his life. At night, we'd hear him giggling in his room. At first, I thought maybe he wasn't fully asleep. You know how toddlers are. They fight sleep, talk to themselves, wake up in weird phases. So I check on him through the baby monitor, and sure enough he'd be lying there in his crib, eyes closed, smiling, sometimes laughing softly. It was cute, honestly. I figured he was dreaming about something funny. My husband thought it was adorable. What do you think he's dreaming about? He'd ask, watching the monitor with this grin on his face. I don't know, I'd say. Probably cartoons or his toys or something. It became a regular thing. Almost every night we'd hear those little giggles coming from his room. We got used to it. It was just part of his routine now. Our son, laughing in his sleep. But then one night, I walked past his room and heard him talking. Not babbling. Talking like he was having a conversation with someone. I paused outside his door, listening. His voice was soft, happy, but I could hear him clearly. "Okay," he said. "Your turn now?" Then he giggled. A pause. "No, like this!" Another giggle. I opened the door quietly and peeked inside. He was sitting up in his crib, facing the corner of the room. His hands were moving like he was playing with something, or someone. But there was nothing there. Just the empty corner dimly lit by his nightlight. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "Who are you talking to?" He turned to look at me, still smiling. The man. I felt a small chill run through me, but I brushed it off. Imaginary friends were normal at this age. Totally normal. "What man, sweetie?" "The nice man," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He comes and plays with me." I walked over and picked him up, glancing at the corner he'd been facing. Nothing. Of course there was nothing. "Well, it's bedtime now, okay? The nice man has to go home." He nodded, resting his head on my shoulder. "Okay, Mommy." I put him back down, tucked him in, and left the room. When I got back to our bedroom, I mentioned it to my husband. He said, "Someone's playing with him?" he asked, looking up from his phone. "Yeah, probably just an imaginary friend," he shrugged. "Makes sense. Kids do that." And that was it. We didn't think much of it. Kids have wild imaginations. They see things that aren't there, talk to people who don't exist. It's part of growing up. The weeks went by and the laughter continued. Sometimes I'd hear my son talking in his room, having these one-sided conversations that sounded so genuine. It almost felt like someone was responding. But every time I checked, he was alone. Then one day, a few months after we'd moved in, I finally got around to hanging up the pictures. We had boxes of framed photos still sitting in the garage. Family pictures, wedding photos, old snapshots we'd never found the right place for. I spent the afternoon sorting through them, deciding what would go where. My husband was at work, so it was just me and our son. I found a picture of my father-in-law. It was a good one. Him smiling at a family barbecue a few years before he passed. My husband loved this photo. I decided to hang it in the hallway near the living room, where we'd see it every day. I hammered in the nail, hung the frame, and stepped back to make sure it was straight. My son was playing on the floor nearby with his toy cars, mostly ignoring me. "There," I said, more to myself than to him. "That looks nice." He glanced up at the wall, and then he froze. He stared at the picture for a long moment, his little face scrunched up in concentration, like he was trying to figure something out. Then he looked at me. "Mommy," he said slowly, "why do you have a picture of the man that comes and plays with me at night?" Everything stopped. I stood there staring at him, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. "What?" He pointed at the picture. "That's the man. The nice man who plays with me." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My son had never seen this picture before. We'd kept it packed away since before he was born. In my early 20s, I lived in this massive old house with 6 other people. It was one of those places you rent when you're young and broke. 5 bedrooms split between too many roommates, creaky floors, drafty windows, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of whatever someone had cooked 3 days ago. My partner and I shared one of the bedrooms on the 2nd floor. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The house had a strange feeling to it. Nothing I could put my finger on exactly. It just felt occupied. Even when everyone was out, even when the place should have been quiet and empty, it never quite felt that way. There was always this sense that something else was there, watching, waiting. I'd brushed it off for months. Old houses feel weird. That's just how they are. The floors settle. The walls hold on to sounds. Your mind fills in the gaps. I told myself that over and over, until the night I couldn't explain it away anymore. It was late. I don't remember the exact time, but it was well past midnight. My partner was asleep next to me, breathing slow and steady. I'd been drifting in and out. You know that half-asleep state where you're aware of your surroundings but not fully conscious. And then something pulled me all the way awake. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but not pitch black. There was enough light coming in from the street lamp outside that I could make out the shapes of our furniture. The dresser, the chair in the corner, the door. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly as it should. Except I knew something was there. I can't explain how I knew. I didn't see anything, not really. But I felt it. In the corner of the room near the dresser, there was a presence. It wasn't visible in the traditional sense. No figure, no shadow, no outline. But I knew with absolute certainty that something was standing there. Watching me, my chest tightened. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just lay there staring at the corner, trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous. There's nothing there. You're tired. You're imagining things. Go back to sleep. But I couldn't. Because I knew I wasn't imagining it, I glanced over at my partner. They were still asleep, completely undisturbed. I wanted to wake them up, to shake them and ask if they felt it too. But I didn't. What would I even say? That I felt like something was in the room. That sounded insane. So I closed my eyes. I thought maybe if I just didn't look it would go away. If I ignored it, if I willed it to not be there, maybe I could trick my brain into letting it go. I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I tried to calm down, tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. I could feel it getting closer. I don't know how I knew. My eyes were closed. I couldn't see anything. But I could feel the air in the room shift, like something had moved, like something was now standing right next to the bed. My heart started pounding so hard I thought my partner would hear it. I kept my eyes shut, too terrified to open them. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to confirm what I already knew, that whatever had been in the corner was now inches away from me, looking down at me. I could feel it. Right there watching. I don't know how long I kept my eyes closed. Seconds, minutes. Time felt strange, like it had slowed down or stopped altogether. But eventually something changed. The weight in the room lifted. The oppressive feeling of being watched eased. A wave of relief washed over me, sudden and overwhelming. I opened my eyes. Nothing. The room was empty. Just my partner sleeping next to me. The same furniture, the same dim light from outside. Whatever had been there was gone. I lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. Part of me wanted to believe I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd been half asleep, and my brain had played tricks on me. But I knew better. I'd been awake. I'd felt it. And it had been real. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? That I felt something standing in my room? That I knew something was there even though I couldn't see it? It sounded absurd even in my own head. So I kept it to myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling. For days afterward, I'd walk into my room and immediately scan the corners, half expecting to feel that presence again. I started leaving the hallway light on at night. I made sure my partner went to sleep before I did, so I wouldn't be alone in the dark, and then I saw it again. It was a few weeks later. I'd almost convinced myself the first time had been a fluke, some weird sleep-related hallucination. But then it happened again, and this time it was different. I was coming up the stairs late one night. Everyone else in the house was asleep. I was the only one still up, and the house was quiet in that heavy, unnatural way it always was. I reached the top of the staircase and turned toward the hallway that led to my room. And that's when I saw it. Just for a second. A flicker. A presence at the far end of the hall near the bathroom. The same feeling I'd had in my room, that knowing, that certainty that something was there. But this time I could almost see it. Not clearly, not enough to make out any details. Just the vague impression of something standing there. I froze. My hand gripped the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. I stared down the hallway, willing myself to see it more clearly, to confirm what I thought I was seeing. And then it was gone. Just like that. One moment it was there, and the next it wasn't. The hallway was empty. The oppressive feeling vanished. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, staring at the spot where I'd seen or felt it. I didn't go to my room right away. I stood at the top of those stairs for a while, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that house was watching me, that it had been watching me all along. I never saw it again after that, or felt it for that matter. My partner and I moved out of that house a few months later, and I never told them about what I'd experienced. I don't know if they would have believed me. Hell, I'm not sure I would have believed me, but I know what I felt. I know what I saw, even if I can't fully describe it. And I know that whatever was in that house, it wasn't just my imagination. Sometimes late at night I still think about it, about the presence in the corner, about the way it moved closer when I closed my eyes, about the brief flicker at the top of the stairs, and I wonder if it's still there, waiting in that old house, watching whoever lives there now. I rented this old house during college with a bunch of roommates. It was cheap, spacious, and close to campus. Everything broke college students could ask for. What we didn't realize when we signed the lease was that we weren't going to be the only ones living there. Things started happening almost immediately. Small stuff at first. Doors opening on their own. Footsteps when no one was walking. The kind of things you could brush off if you really wanted to. But it escalated fast. Within the first semester, roommate after roommate moved out. They'd make excuses. Too far from classes, found a better place, whatever. But I knew the real reason. They were scared. Eventually it was just me and one other guy left in this 5-bedroom house. We were either too stubborn or too broke to leave. Probably both. The worst incidents always happened at 3 in the morning. I don't know why, but that seemed to be the witching hour in that place. One weekend I was home alone. My roommate had gone to visit his parents, and everyone else was long gone. I woke up to the sound of a door slamming. Over and over. Bang, bang, bang. At first I thought it was my roommate's door. I yelled from bed, "Dude, cut it out!" But the slamming didn't stop. That's when I remembered. I was the only person in the house. The second I realized that, the slamming stopped. Dead silence. I lay there, heart pounding, staring at my closed bedroom door. Then I heard it. The hippie beads I'd hung outside my door, just some cheap decorative thing, started swaying. Not gently, violently. They slapped against the doorframe in perfect rhythm, loud enough that I could hear every single bead hitting the wood. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there in bed, curled up in the fetal position, watching those beads swing back and forth through the crack under my door. This went on for half an hour. I seriously considered popping out my air conditioning unit and jumping out the window. I'm on the second floor, but at that point I didn't care. Eventually it stopped, just like that. The beads went still and the house was silent again. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Another time I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of our Nintendo blaring from the back porch. We had it set up out there, because it was the only place with enough space for everyone to hang out. The music was loud, loud enough that it pulled me out of a deep sleep. So I figured some drunk kid had wandered in and started playing. I grabbed a baseball bat and headed toward the back of the house. The closer I got, the louder the music became. I could hear the tinny sound effects, the upbeat theme song, everything. But the second I opened the door to the porch, it went completely silent. I stood there, bat in hand, staring at the dark TV screen. The Nintendo wasn't even on. I checked the power, the cords, everything. Nothing was plugged in. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. One afternoon I had some friends over. They'd heard me mention that the house was haunted, but no one believed me. So I decided to prove it. I stood in the middle of the living room and said out loud, "If you're here, do something, anything." Every light in the house started flickering, all at once, for a solid minute. It was the middle of the day, bright sunlight coming through the windows, but every single light fixture in the house was going crazy. My friends just stared, mouths open, not saying a word. When it stopped, no one joked about it anymore. Almost everyone who stayed overnight in that house experienced sleep paralysis. Not once or twice, constantly. Friends who had never had it before would wake up in the middle of the night, unable to move, feeling like something was sitting on their chest. It got to the point where people stopped accepting our invitations to crash. And the smell. God, the smell. Every single time something happened, the house would fill with this overpowering flowery perfume. Old lady perfume. The kind that's so strong it makes your eyes water. You couldn't escape it. It would linger for hours. The house had this trapdoor built into the floor that led to the basement. We kept a rug over it because it creeped everyone out. Things would go missing constantly. Keys, wallets, remotes, random stuff. And they'd always turn up down there. The house also had an old coal chute from back when it was heated by coal. Whenever we'd go down to the basement looking for our missing things, we'd find them placed neatly on the chute. Like someone was leaving them there for us to find. My roommate saw her once. Or at least he saw something. He was up late playing video games when he noticed mist hovering near the kitchen. It moved slowly, deliberately toward the bathroom. The bathroom had a trap door that led to the attic, and that's where we figured she lived. The old lady. Whoever she was. Another night, my roommate was doing his usual routine, locking doors, turning off lights before bed. He had his back to the living room, heading toward the door, when someone breathed directly into his ear. Ha ha, just like that, loud, close. He thought it was me messing with him. He spun around, ready to yell at me, but no one was there. He stood there for a second, then ran to his room. He literally pissed himself. He was too terrified to come back out, so he left the TV and all the lights on for the rest of the night. The attic was the worst. We'd hear loud thumps up there at all hours. Day, night, didn't matter. We told ourselves it was squirrels. It had to be squirrels, but we both knew better. No one ever went up there to check. We didn't want to know. Voices woke us up constantly. Not clear enough to make out words, but distinct enough that you knew it wasn't coming from outside. I spent so many mornings sitting on the front porch, waiting for the sun to come up before I'd go back inside. I couldn't handle being in that house alone in the dark anymore. The weirdest part. Years later, I ran into a friend who told me he'd rented a house from the same landlord. Different house, same town. He and all his roommates moved out because it was haunted too. I didn't think much of it until he described what happened. The sleep paralysis, the missing items, and the smell. That same old lady perfume, overpowering, unmistakable. I felt my blood run cold. "What did you just say?" "The perfume," he repeated. Every time something weird happened, the whole place would reek of it. Like old lady flowery perfume. I just stared at